When Beth and I first began church planting, we were doing it in a community that was just adjacent to the metropolitan area of Milwaukee in a community called Wauwatosa. And we started a church there with a group of people, and we had very limited resources and no building. And so eventually we got to the place where we were able to create an office space. And we picked this just really beautiful warehouse, former warehouse building that there were a number of other leases that had space in it. It was this room that was bigger than this and just absolutely majestic. There were like iron I-beams, and there were skylights in the rooftop, and there were, brick and stucco on the side. I mean, it looked like everything we wanted the church to be, kind of like, we are really hip. It felt like it was saying that to us, and we're cool. You come to our church. This is kind of the way we are. And I love that office. And I love that space that we created there, and people would come in and visit and interact with us there. But as good as the building was, the landlord was just the opposite of that. And it was Wisconsin. And so in the middle of the wintertime, things got cold. And it was an old building, and so things broke down. And so sometimes the electricity wouldn't work when I would come into work. Sometimes the heater wouldn't work, the furnace wouldn't work, and it would be bitter cold in the place. And all of the different offices and clusters of people, they wouldn't even show up because it was just too cold to be there. I had conversations with our landlord, and I just said, we just can't handle this. And he would let me know, well, it is an old building, and this kind of stuff takes time. And I realized that after things happened, month after month and year after year, that nothing ever was going to change. His reasons for why things were bad weren't explanations, they were excuses. And things didn't change. It would be called, well, he would essentially do this sort of a shrug, there's nothing I can do about it sort of a thing. And I realized every time I ask this guy for help, he's going to give me an excuse. And things will never change. They're just lame excuses. Well, this morning in John chapter 5, we have a lame person offering to Jesus excuses. And that's what we're going to look at this morning to try to diagnose them. Now, when we talk about lame excuses, I don't necessarily mean the ones that are sort of unbelievable, like, the dog ate my homework, right? We've heard that one, or it's my brother's fault that I hit him. That's a really pretty good one, actually. Or I heard this one just yesterday, all this rain is ruining my golf game. Now, for me, if this person that said it, Cliff, it was you, and I would just say, sorry, I don't mean to throw you under the bus here. We played golf together, but he knows rain can't ruin my golf game. My golf game is ruined anyway. And so it just is a nonsensical excuse. So there are lame excuses that are excuses like, wow, well, that excuse is nonsensical because you don't have a dog, and you actually made the decision to hit your brother, and you would be a lousy golfer even if it weren't raining. Those are just kind of the excuses that are nonsensical, but there are excuses that make sense, and they make sense, and they're tragic excuses. They're lame excuses not because they're nonsensical. They're lame because they're devastating. They're regrettable. They're tragic. They're excuses that are used to say, guess what? I'm not going to change. Nothing's ever going to be different than this. It's just where I live and what I have to navigate in my life. And God is inviting us in this account that John provides for us to consider the struggles in our life that never go away, that never seem to be fixed. I think we all have lists, don't we? Those things in our life that, it's just really never gone away. What if some of those issues and challenges in our life have never gone away because we've packed around them reasons why things will stay the same? We all have lists. They might be in the category of relationships that are broken, or conflict that endures, or a distance in relationship with someone, or or discouragement or stuff that's happening at work that never changes. You know, it's this sense, it's kind of like life is not turning out the way I hoped it would, and all I've got are reasons why my life continues to be marked by disappointment. Sort of the shrug living. It's just the way it's going to be. Well, Jesus comes to this man who says, this is just the way it's going to be. And he says, do you want to get well? So we're looking at this morning in this text that John has written about for us. And the question is, do you want to be well? I want to accompany that by three actually questions that the text drives us towards. And the first one is this: what if we threw away all of our lame reasons? What if we just gave them no value or no significance? What if we didn't use them to bolster the circumstances we find ourselves in? No more lame reasons. Because it's really what they are. They're beyond excuses. They're reasons. They're rationale. They seem reasonable to us. They certainly did to the lame man. I mean, he's saying to Jesus, he says, listen, I don't have anybody to help me. I mean, that's like a legitimate reason to still be lame. In fact, when I try to get there, people just beat me. They're faster than I am. Legitimate reason to still be lame. And he says, don't think I don't care about this. I've been working on this for 38 years. Give me credit for that. You know, you see all of this rationale that's built around it. And Jesus' question suggests that he's now given up hope, and all he has are reasons. There's no hope. All of his aspirations for where his life might be or where it would go have been conceded, replaced by reasons why things have not changed. You know, someone said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and achieving the same result. Well, that might be true, but it's not insanity. It's human nature to do the same thing over and over again and anticipate the same result will be true. It seems rational. Why is your marriage so bad? Well, let me tell you the reason why. And it is accompanied by a sentence that starts with they, and a sentence that starts with we, and a sentence that starts with them, and a sentence that starts with that, and a sentence that starts with I, and years and years and years of this. You see, there's a reason why I'm in the state I'm in. And every one of those sentences seems rational. In fact, we might hear them as, I think I understand. You know, there's no one here to help me. Well, it's true. My relationships are broken. I'm constantly battling discouragement or depression. It's true. And the collection of reasons that convince us that things cannot change are very similar to the ones that the lame one was convinced of. It's just not going to get any better. They cause us to remain in the state we're in, lame. They're lame excuses. They're lame reasons to remain in a state of maybe moderate miserableness. Just a sense of kind of underlying discontent. To embrace a life and a living that is less than we anticipated, all at the same time blind to any other potential option. I mean, like, what describes your life right now? You've got a list of disappointments, don't you? I certainly do. And accompanying those lists of disappointments, if you were to ask me, I could give you a list of the reasons why that's the way things are. You know what's interesting to me in this text is that Jesus doesn't care about the list. He doesn't. He just walks past it and he says, get up, take your mat, and walk. He doesn't interact with the reasons. Well, let me explain. He doesn't even help him to figure out how to make those reasons go away. Jesus is not interested in this narrative on the reasons. They seem to be inconsequential. He's saying, I got one question for you. Just one. Do you want to be well? That's it. So all of these lame reasons just go away. They don't matter. They don't accomplish what needs to happen. So you know that list you've got and the sense you have in your life? Listen. Do you hear that? Do you hear it? Do you want to be well? Do you want to be well? There's a voice simply asking you, do you want it? You might say to me, Mark, no. Don't make any promises this morning. Yet, in this text, there is a pathway embedded that could be titled, How to Get Well. I mean, it is right here. Now, there's a spoiler alert here. Not everyone in this account was interested in getting well. Even at the end of chapter 6, we see these people just walking away from Jesus and say, don't want to have anything to do with you. We're going to notice even the response of this lame person here that is a bit of a disappointment. So the first question is, what if we discard our lame reasons and don't let them count? And then the second question is this, what if we made better decisions? The lame man begins well. I mean, Jesus says, get up and take up your mat and walk, and he did. He did just that. So it begins well, and then he makes a consequential decision. He has another conversation with Jesus. And this no longer lame person makes a lame decision. This man tells on Jesus. I mean, he knew there would be trouble. If you look at chapter 5, verse 12, it says, so they asked, these people came up to us, who made you well? They're asking. It's a Sabbath, and the law forbids you to carry your mat. How did this happen? And they said in verse 12, so they asked him, who is this fellow who told you to pick it up and walk? What's the lame man to think about what they're going to do when they meet Jesus? Well, Jesus finally chases him down and says, I'll tell you who that was. I mean, this is almost, I couldn't call it Judas, but there's this sense of the lame man is throwing Jesus under the bus. He knows when he tells those religious leaders who healed him, what those religious leaders are going to want to do to Jesus. That is a lame decision. But it's the decision that this person makes in the text. He knew there would be trouble. What triggered that, I wonder? What triggered that? I mean, the only thing we have here before it says the man went away and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus is Jesus found him in the temple and he said to him, see, you are well again. Stop sinning or something worse may happen to you. It seems like he didn't like that. That's not a decision that he thought Jesus should make. I mean, it almost is a little bit of, well, who made you the boss? Says this walking man. His decision to disregard Jesus. Now, I want to unpack this a little bit and say, so what does it mean to make wise decisions? The first question is what if we discard lame reasons? And the second was, what if we made better decisions? And what would those decisions be? Well, I'm going to just unpack it. I'm going to use verse 8 for this. And I think it's a legitimate way to look at the decision that Jesus was calling him and us to make. It says in verse 8, Jesus said, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." I think each of those things have some value to them. The first is get up. If we want to be made well, Jesus is going to say to you, so change your position. Well, you don't understand. Didn't you understand? I'm lame. And this is my position for 28 years and 38 years, and Jesus is so change it. Get up. And I don't know that it's necessary or valuable even for us to just use this as a metaphor for like change your life. I mean, this is a specific, practical, necessary action. If you're going to be made well, if you're no longer going to be lame, you're going to have to get up. So the things that are going on in my life that are broken and I have excuses for, what would Jesus say about them? Not just metaphorically get up, but practically speaking, what is Jesus going to tell me to do different? Because the thing about change is it means things will change. Am I going to be willing to change? And so Jesus is saying to this lame man, your life's going to change. Are you going to do that? And regardless of the circumstance, the disappointment, the frustration, the lameness in our life, the brokenness in our life, there is something Jesus wants to say specific about that brokenness. I don't know what it is, but there's something Jesus will want to say specific about it. To the lame man, he said, get up. The second thing he says is pick up your mat. It's kind of the sense that, well, and now you're walking into a new life. You're going to need this mat. Go ahead and take it with you. You know, I would think that if this were a movie, the lame man would just get up and we would all celebrate and the credits would roll at the end of the movie and the music would start and it would be all over. No, this isn't a movie. Actually, after Jesus does something to heal him, there's something that happens after that. And it's complicated. And it's going to cause its own set of crises and issues and challenges along the way too. So he's saying, walk into it. You're going to have a life ahead of you, and it's going to come with complications as well. We dare not think that any time that God does something to transform one set of circumstances in our life, there won't be another set of circumstances in our life that come along. I'm sorry, I just hate to break the news to you. You know it, don't you? Dear God, I need a different job. And you get a different job, and guess what? Dear God, I need something else. It's just this progression of circumstances that come along the way, and there's complexity that comes with carrying your mat through life. The complexity for this man was the religious leaders found him and said, you shouldn't be doing that right now. He's healed, but now he's in a brand new mess with a brand new set of people. Life is not perfectly uncomplicated once Jesus changes things. In fact, you will still find Jesus necessary. And that's really what we roll into here. Get up, pick up your bed, and walk. Paul uses a different phrase. He uses the phrase, keep in step with the Spirit. Jesus is at the center. John has already talked about that. We talked about that last week. The week before that, we heard Jesus' invitation for us not to stand over there in brokenness that is filled with brokenness and condemnation. Don't stand in that place. Come with Jesus is everything that the Gospel of John is telling us. Come with Jesus. Follow Jesus, and don't continue to engage in the sin that ruins life. I mean, that really is what Jesus was saying here. He says, stop sinning or something worse may happen to you. Theologians have really wrestled with this. What does this mean? Is this some ontological thing, whatever? It means what it means, that if we sin, it means something worse will happen to us. And sin literally is brokenness, and it's the thing that ruins our life. You know what Jesus is saying here? He's saying, stop doing the things that ruin your life because they will ruin your life. That's what he's saying. Stop doing the things that will ruin your life because they will ruin your life. This ticked off the lame man. And the decision made wasn't a decision to walk the road with Jesus, if I may. John has told us that Jesus is the one who takes away the sins of the world, and the lame man tosses aside the one who takes away the sins of the world and throws him under the bus. Walk with me. I am Lord. We're not going to have time to unpack this here. We had a really wonderful conversation about this at 9 o'clock hour as we were looking at this text together, but just these magnificent declarations of the character of who Jesus is. I mean, in verse 19, we see it, and the words are very truly, I tell you, or really, 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 this is true. And it had these statements. He said, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can only do what he sees his Father doing, because whatever the Father does, the Son also does. And there's a sense of connection between who the Father is and who the Son is. In fact, they say it here. Do you see what it is? In verse 18, it says they were accusing Jesus not only of breaking the Sabbath, but calling God his Father, making himself equal with God. That's what irritated them. Jesus was making himself equal to God. And what's Jesus' response? 3 times in the following text, I am God, I am God, I am God. I mean, it brings us back to that question that was asked. I think it might have been C.S. Lewis, I'm not sure. Jesus is either Lord, or he is a crazy man, or he is deceitful liar. Take your pick. He's either crazy, loony, or he's a liar, neither of which are really good reasons to follow anyone, or he is who he says he is. And so John is saying to you and to me, so are you going to follow him or not? Are you going to get up, take up your mat, and walk with Jesus? There's the invitation in the text. There's the decision that is laid out in front of us and saying, what's your choice going to be? So there's a third question. The first one is, what if we discarded our lame reasons? Second one is, what if we made Jesus-informed decisions, to get up, to change our position, to pick up our mat, to proceed and to walk with Jesus? And here's the third question. What if we embrace the solutions that the Lord offered? No more lame solutions. What if we embrace the solutions that the Lord offers us? Now, one more thing here, and we're moving towards an application. This whole context is a Sabbath day. And this whole discussion is a Sabbath discussion. It's a discussion about the Sabbath and what it ought to be and what it means not to break the rules. That's the setting that we find ourselves right in here. And I would suggest to you that in the midst of the setting is the solution that Jesus is offering you and me this morning regarding our lame decisions, and offering a lame solution, a solution to that. The religious leaders had a solution to the healing of the lame man, and it was stop it. In fact, if they had been there, they would have said to the lame man, you need to follow our rules even if it leaves you lame. The religious leaders interpreted God's intentions in a way that would diminish, demand, and restrict. That's what they thought the Sabbath was about. In fact, if we turn to verse 38, Jesus is actually repeating this back to them. Look at John chapter 5, verse 38. We read these words. I'll start in verse 39. You study the scriptures diligently because you think that in them you have eternal life. These are the very scriptures that testify about me, yet you refuse to come to me to have life. They went to the rules to diminish, demand, and restrict. And Jesus says, no. No, come to me, and you will have life in me. Let me reframe Sabbath for you. May I? May I reframe Sabbath for you? Point number one, I am the one that has authority over life. Life here and life in eternity. If anyone is going to speak about what the Sabbath ought to be and get it right, it's me. I have authority over life. And then secondly, I'm the one that has authority over the Sabbath. Authority to ordain Sabbath as something that gives life. Elsewhere in the other Gospels we read, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. I made this for you. I didn't make this for another way that I can get you in trouble if you don't follow my directions. It's not a set of rules. Sabbath is meant to be this gift given to us, this grace that is given to us. Sabbath is meant to be a solution for lame living. No kidding. That's what this text is telling us. Jesus earlier had said, worship the Father in spirit and in truth. And he tells us what that means, and now he tells us how that happens. This early spiritual practice of Sabbath rest. I mean, it was really there from the very beginning. We know this. I'm just telling you what you already know. In the very beginning of creation, God creates and develops beauty and gives humankind a purpose and a role. And then on the seventh day, it says that God rested. I love John Walton's diagnosis, interpretation of this. He says when Genesis talks about God resting, there's really almost, maybe you could describe it as a play on words here. It means that God takes his seat in the control room of the universe. And that's how that word rest can be used. And so when it says about God resting, it's not that God was tired and it was exhausting, those 6 days were. It was that God goes to the control room of the universe and he sits down and he's taking care of everything. So, go ahead and rest. He's got it. That's what this sense is. You can have rest accompany your life. Sabbath accompany your life. We know another account of that. It's the story of the man in the wilderness. He says, just go out and get the manna. It'll be in the morning. Go out and take your baskets and collect everything you need for the day. And do it on Monday and do it on Tuesday and do it on Wednesday. But when it comes to Sabbath day, don't go out. The day before, pick 2 days worth of manna. Because guess what? On the Sabbath, I'm going to take care of it for you. I want you to rest. So this form has been throughout all of the history of God's people. From the very beginning of time, the purpose that God had for everybody and all of humankind. To have this Sabbath, this time for us to be able to live out the reality and the practicality of saying, God, glad you're in the control room because I'm going to shut it down for 24 hours right now. Now here I think is the challenge for us. Well, before we get to the challenge for us, I just want to say this was an enculturated practice for them. I mean, the Sabbath was a part of what happened for all of the people living in this place at this time. And Jesus was simply saying to them, in the midst of the Sabbath, I want you to reinsert me. Pull out the rules that have made it destructive and debilitating and leaves people in disarray, and put me in there. And when you put me in the Sabbath, I'm the one who heals lameness of every variety, who heals disappointment, who helps with craving, who restructures distortions. Just put me in the Sabbath and let me be there rather than your rules. The problem for us is we don't have this in our culture, do we? I mean, we work like every day. There's always something to do, and if we don't feel it internally, somebody's saying it to us. I mean, look at our calendars, and we know this is a massive undertaking. We have no cultural practice to reframe. We live in an environment that is, as John Mark Comer says in his book, the ruthlessness of hurry. And he says to us it's something we ought to eliminate. It's this crazy pace of life and torrent of never having enough and never being able to achieve enough. You feel it, don't you? Oh, I do. So what are we going to do when our whole culture doesn't even have anything in place for us to put Jesus into because it's not there at all? Well, I think we've got to rebuild it. I do. I think we have to rebuild Sabbath because our culture is not providing it. And we need that space where we go with Jesus and we're reminded He's in the control room. And all of that stuff that is characterized by disappointment and lameness, He's got something He wants to say to me. He's going to tell me to get up, and He's going to show me how. Because He's there with me in it. So, what does it mean for us to build? Just a couple of quotes that I think would be helpful. This is Karl Rahner. He says, in the torment of the insufficiency of everything attainable, we learn that ultimately in this world there is no finished symphony. The reminder is this: we will always live with the reality of a sense of incompleteness. It is baked into the world we live in. We will always live with a sense of the reality of incompleteness. And Sabbath is to stop and to create a different way of being in the world. St. Augustine said this: you've made us for yourself, and our heart is restless until it finds its rest in you. I'll tell you what I've been challenged about. The discussion group, we meet on Tuesday mornings at 7:30 at Handlebar. We talked about Sabbath this last week, didn't we? We did. I love Walter Brueggemann's comment. He says, people who keep the Sabbath live all 7 days differently. I'll tell you, that one really hit me. It's not just one day. It actually transforms all 7 days. In fact, Comer goes on to say this: watch out for the Sabbath. It will mess with you. First, it will mess with one day of your week. Then it will mess with your whole life. It will mess with your whole life. And it's not just one day. It will mean all 7 days are lived differently. So what is this Sabbath? Well, it's actually Dan Allender, whom some of you might know. He has a book he's written on the Sabbath. By the way, there are a number of books on the Sabbath that are out there right now in all sorts of settings, because I think the world is coming to grips with this reality that we can't survive at the pace we're at. And then we look at God's Word and we realize He had a solution right there from day one. There it was. And when we step into it, Dan Allender says this: the Sabbath is an invitation to enter delight. The Sabbath, when experienced as God intended, that is, with Jesus in the middle of it, is the best day of our lives. Without question or thought, it's the best day of the week. It is the day we anticipate on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and the day we remember on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Sabbath is the holy time where we feast, play, dance, enjoy the one we love, sing, pray, laugh, tell stories, read, paint, walk, and watch creation in its fullness. There's the beauty of it, lived adjacent to Jesus and informed by the one who has told us over and over again, truly, 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 I am the one who made you, who loves you, who cares for you, who longs for you to live a life that is lived to the full. So, practically speaking, I'm going a little over it, but I want to make sure we catch this. We're going to need to reinsert this, to put back all that has smothered it. It's like it's just kind of mud that's just filled over any sense of Sabbath, to be able to push it back and say, no, we're going to create this space, to create a way of being in the world. Comer advocates, and you've heard many others advocate, put some space in your day. I mean, for those of us that don't have kids that wake up before us and are screaming and demanding something, it's a little easier. For those of you that have got those issues, I don't know where that space will be, but how do you kind of just push it out so it's Sabbath? I mean, Sabbath I know means a day generally, but it's also a concept. It's also a principle of the way we put that place of peace, which really means flourishing in our life. And then we begin to construct it slowly over time because it's going to require that. If I just told you, okay, everybody, let's just take 24 hours right now, set your calendars next week, it's going to be, that's a certain fail for most of us in this room, isn't it? But what if we just said, okay, incrementally, I'm going to add this part and this part. You're already partway there. You're here this morning. And it's in a space where you can enjoy one another and worship and reflect and ask God, what are you saying to me? I mean, you're partway there. And I would even just say to you, what about in the Sundays where you're not hearing, you're someplace else? What if you keep that space and allow Jesus to be able to occupy that space? And then just incrementally to say, you know what, I'm going to add another hour, or after I leave here, I'm going to do this, or whatever it might be. You understand what I'm saying? I'm just urging you somehow to figure out how to embrace the solution to the chaos and the disappointment and the things that cause our life to be lame by following the very thing that God says He wants to give us. And all of that stuff you're worried about, He has said this, trust me, I'll take care of it. I'm in the control room. I'll take care of it. So what does it mean if we just incrementally, against culture, restore that space and discover as a result of it that it not only shapes that time, but every bit a part of our life, every bit a part of the lameness of our life, God cares about.